On our morning show today, we are honored to have State Senator Sarah Keyeski of the 14th Senate District in to talk about all of the things, concerns, and goings on in the state of Wisconsin. Good to see you again, Senator.
Bill.
It's been a little while. Did you have a good summer?
I'll be honest, I had a rough summer. I got sick for quite a bit of it, which was really unfortunate. Landed me in the hospital for a little bit. Now I'm doing much better, and I have just so appreciated being healthy again. Honestly, not the greatest summer, but I'm looking forward to the fall now.
Absolutely. It's beautiful out there. And,
sure is.
and you're back to work and going to meetings and conferences and hitting the ground running, aren't you?
Yeah. I mean, even though we haven't been in session, I mean, it's still really busy. There's all kinds of things I can do and have been doing. Like you said, I've been going to conferences. I've been touring areas in my district. I've been visiting places that are important to see what's happening, new and innovative ideas. I've been chatting with constituents in listening sessions. And I've been going to committee meetings that we still have or caucus meetings. So yeah, still very busy.
I know recently you were at the State Innovation Exchange Agriculture Conference in the Twin Cities.
Yes.
Can you talk about that and what you took from that?
Yeah, sure. So it was this interesting opportunity to meet with, they gathered, SIX is what it's called, State Innovation Exchange. They brought together 24 state legislators that all have an interest in rural agriculture and the policies. And in particular, the progressive policies that can be helpful for rural ag. So it was all Democrats, interestingly, that were there. And we met, we cover, I think the 24 of us were from at least 7 or 8 different states. And so seeing different things at the local level and talking together about what we're seeing in our states, what our concerns are about our rural livability in general, everything from what's happening with our water supply, what's happening with our small farms and consolidation, the monopolization of big ag and how that's impacting our agricultural land and use, and about the idea of how do we transition farms to the next generation when they're often really expensive and most young people don't have the finances for that, and how do we help them be able to move into the world of agriculture, because we still need many people to live and love that job, but it's really challenging on a financial level. So it was really interesting to be able to be together with these people that just really care about rural America like I do. Being from a small family farm, it just was lovely to get others caring about it too, all across the state to talk.
What's the talk right now about tariffs? I know there's something in the news today about soybean growers being a little concerned about China not buying from the U.S. and things like that. What are some of the things that you've heard?
A little concerned is a mild way to say it. I think there's great concern that historically China has been a huge purchaser of our soybeans. And based on the tariffs, what they've decided is that they're just not going to buy any from the United States. And so there's a big zero now. And our soybean producers are right now harvesting their soybeans and not necessarily having a place for them to go. And so what we know is that China is now changing their buying to South America. And they are capable of growing soybeans, and they are building up their production levels to replace us. And so while the tariffs are hurting us this season, the concern is we could maybe manage as a farming community a tough year, right? The problem is that if we ultimately have this tariff issue that is creating a country to go to another country, so China going to South America, for example, and building up those trade relationships, then the next year, we simply, even if the tariffs were gone, those trade relationships are now more solid, and ours haven't been, and that changes the trajectory for the next many, many years, even if these tariffs are pulled off. So it has huge implications. And then there's been, $20 million recently sent to Argentina from this government. So it's sort of helping the people that are taking the business away from our local farmers. So it's a very convoluted, confusing, hurtful policy progression lately that I think has dire impact on our farmers, because we also need to now think about, what are we going to do next year? What do we plant? And we don't know what's going to happen with these tariffs. We don't know what's going to happen now with these markets. And so there's so much influx, and there's already so much uncertainty as farming anyway. When you don't know about what's going to happen with your weather, you don't know what's going to happen. To have this governmental impact also create so much uncertainty is just, I can't imagine, honestly. The emotional toll is probably being taken on our farmers, and so I worry about that a lot. And I'm hopeful that this gets figured out. I'm hopeful that they are given help. But again, I'm not sure that that's going to be a solution. That feels like a short-term Band-Aid to something that is a gashing wound right now that was self-created by the tariff policies.
You mentioned the cost of trying to get into farming, too. And the other thing that I had thought of recently, we had talked about shortage of housing. And one of the things, when my wife and I bought our first house in 1988, it cost $25,500. First time, those kind of things.
Yowza.
Yeah,
Nice.
Those things don't exist anymore. And for somebody and I was 24, for somebody that's 24 now, it's very difficult to purchase a home.
Well, I have 24-year-old, 25-year-old, 23-year-old young men in my life. They're my sons. And I can tell you that they are struggling to even pay rent. Two of my boys live together with another friend. Their rent is over, I believe, $800 each. And that is just to live in a reasonable apartment, a 3-bedroom that they can, they live in Cottage Grove near their jobs. And so not only is it hard to buy a home, but it's hard to rent right now. And if you are renting, you aren't building any equity with that. And so you don't have then the resource of money unless you're able to save a lot. You don't have the money to be saved to put down a down payment. And so right now, our young people are facing a really difficult situation with the housing market, and then what that means for their wealth growth potential. If we aren't able to have them start kind of at the younger ages, in their 20s, early 30s, to be able to develop that, I think we're going to have a lot of young people that are going to not be able to reach some of the successes that their parents have. And that is honestly heartbreaking for me with 6 kids that sees that they might not be able to have some of the advantages that I've had. And that's to no fault of their own. That's the nature. Some people like to, kind of condemn young people these days to, they're lazy. There's this kind of misperception that can kind of be bounced around a bit. And I think it's really unfair. I see my kids and their friends working hard, being dedicated to their jobs, getting their college degrees, trying to just do what they were always told was going to help them be successful and launch. And it's incredibly difficult right now because prices are so high. So I find it heartbreaking right now. And I think we need to do much more to help improve our economic situation for all people, not just, the people that are getting these high-end tax deductions that were put in the big bill that the federal government passed. There are wealthy people receiving tax breaks to make them wealthier. Mm-hmm. And I find it quite horrifying, frankly.
I was just wondering if there's any bills that have been talked about, like first-time home buyers and some incentives and things like that can, maybe help pave the way for young people trying to buy that first house.
Yeah, well, back, many months ago now, I put forth a bill trying to limit hedge funds from being able to purchase single-family homes, thinking that big consolidated organized money shouldn't necessarily have the ability to buy into single-family homes. We wanted to make those available for people to buy rather than companies to buy. Unfortunately, that bill, which I think is pretty solid, wasn't even given a hearing. So we're trying. I know, but there are some limitations to what we can do right now when we're not even able to get movement on a bill that at least should have a hearing. If people have some issues with it, absolutely let me know, right? Mm-hmm. Maybe we could make some modifications, but I'm trying to help where I can, be innovative, be thinking of some options, and unfortunately, like I said, my Republican colleagues just won't even have that get a hearing. So I'm disheartened by that.
State budget providing no increase to general aid to public schools. It was one of the things you wanted to talk about, and the impact of property taxes for our local districts.
Yeah, doggone it. I think it's so tricky. I've heard so long, not being in politics, about how people are so frustrated by their property taxes, including me, right? Property taxpayer, I am, and it's been frustrating to see our property taxes be asked to go up with referendum regularly, and I have not fully understood why that was, to be honest. And I just felt the impact and felt frustrated by it. And now coming into the legislature, I still feel the frustration, but now I'm much less oriented to go, what's going on with this school? Why can't they make their payments better somehow? Why are we constantly having to pay more? Because that was kind of the simplistic view of it, frankly, by me even. I just didn't fully understand. And now that I'm in, I'm like, oh my, now I have a fuller picture, right? And with more information, you have more clarity. Well, the information is that our schools, since 2009, they have not gotten an inflationary increase to what they've needed to pay for operational costs. Meaning, for example, they get money from the state, but it is not in relation to the inflationary increases of things like if they need schools have to heat their building. Those prices are rising. They need to pay for insurance for staff. Those costs are rising. They pay for transportation, gas, mechanics. Those costs are rising. And so when schools are given plateau of payment and not given inflationary increases to payment, but still having to pay those inflationary prices, then they're stuck. And so the only place they can go, if they're not getting state general aid increases that are connected to inflation, they need to go to the other bucket of money or option, which is property taxes raising, so that they can pay for their operational costs so they can continue to function well. Or at some level, maybe decently. Maybe well is even a little strong because they're having to cut programs and cut staff and such, because they're not going to maybe be able to pay for all things. So I think understanding that this last budget, so it's a biennial budget, 2 years. This is the first time in a budget that there was not a penny, not a cent, no increase to the general aid money given to schools. Again, general aid is one component. The other is property taxes. So with no money increase given to general aid, schools are essentially forced, I believe intentionally forced, to go to the property tax owners. And now the schools are in this situation where they're having to say, can you please help us again? And people aren't understanding necessarily, again, thinking, well, are you just not doing an economically wise, use of your finances? This isn't about particular schools. Referenda, I have 30 school districts that touch my district, the 14th Senate district. Every single one of them has had to go to referenda at least once in the last number of years. And so we know it's not like a one-off or a two-off where there's like some, financial malfeasance by some schools. It's actually a systemic problem that feels quite intentional when we also have at the same time in our most recent budget almost $1 billion with a B dollars that are going to go each year. Mind you, there's no general aid increase, but there's going to be $1 billion going to voucher schools from taxpayer money. That is a goal of the Republicans in our legislature right now, is to fund these voucher schools and to have taxpayer money go toward them. I fundamentally have an issue with that. I think the idea of voucher schools is fantastic. I think have options like that available. But to have our tax money then basically go to the school, right? So we have the district, they get the money for all the students that should be going there, but then they have to write a check. Essentially, I'm simplifying, but they have to write a check for any of the kids that would be in their school district that are going to a voucher school instead. They have to write a check and give that to them off the top. And so that money is not going to our schools, it's going to these public schools, and going to the voucher schools. So we are going to see schools come to the property tax owners again, asking for an operational increase, a referendum to help them pay their operational costs. And I hope everybody keeps in mind that this was deliberately created because the Republicans would not put any general aid increased money in for inflationary cost increases. And I find it infuriating because my taxes too will go up.
Consolidation was also in the news this year. Since the last time we talked, Senator Keyeski, and I think one of the things they talked about was maybe incentive for some districts, like let's say, maybe this is the only option is to consolidate with another district, money incentive to do that. What's your feeling about consolidation and for some of these rural schools?
Well, obviously, consolidation would probably mostly happen to rural schools, right? And so let's just talk about rural schools for a moment. Rural schools are essentially the main employer in our small towns, meaning they are an economic driver for those small towns. So these schools provide jobs and therefore incomes and therefore residents generally that then also purchase from the local businesses, farmers markets, right? And they buy the homes in these small rural areas. So they help sustain rural livability by being there. Public schools do. And so if you take away a public school to save some money, and I'm not suggesting that there might not be some places, a few, that this might be wise, financially wise. But when I talk to individuals that understand the finances behind the potential of consolidation, what I hear is consolidation feels like it might be a solution to the intentional decrease of funding necessary to manage and help our public schools. It isn't because, again, there's poor management of these schools. And so what we're looking at is this dilemma, right? Is if there would be, let's say, a bit of financial gain, although that's even questionable because you still have to transport kids, and that is a cost. If you think about bringing kids in and out of schools, if you have them further away, further apart from their school, right, you're going to have those increased costs. If you, let's say, consolidate two schools so instead of two superintendents, you have one superintendent, right, you still will probably have to have then 2 or 3 principals and then 4 or 5 vice principals, and then go down the line. You don't actually get rid of many people in the administration because you still have the needs to address the issues with all the students and all the curricula and all the classes that you need. And so it's not actually this big of a solution. So you're not saving a ton of money, and maybe sometimes not much at all. But what you are doing then is saying that these small towns are unviable anymore. Because if you lose the school there, like I said, you lose so much. And if you're living there and you don't have a school there, I can guarantee you're not going to have, a local grocery store. You're not going to have the gas station. You're not going to have any employees that are going to be able to do the small businesses. You're not going to have customers to go to them. You're not going to have good property value anymore because people are going to leave. It's going to become a bit of a ghost town. And so if we care about our state as the Dairyland, if we care about rural life, if we care about small town living and not, just about the big cities. I love rural life. I grew up in a town of 850 people. I now live in a town of 3,000 people. It's big to me, right, in a way. But I lived there because I wanted to raise my kids in a small town. And so I'm heartbroken by the idea that people see this plan of saving money by potentially consolidating small schools, and I think it economically, it's very, very short-sighted and will have grand implications for the population in our state, and therefore the economic viability of our state as a whole.
I know that, you coming from Cashton, that's your old alma mater, and let's say what if? Let's say that they suddenly decided to consolidate with Westby. What a blow that would be for that small town of Cashton, right?
Yeah, the other piece that I would say, and I know this is getting into the feelings, but there is so much sense of community, sense of pride, sense of connection, sense of gathering spaces that give you a place where you belong. With a school and going to the high school football game, let's say, or attending the mock trial, or going to see the theater production. There's a sense of belonging there for the entire community, that when we are saying we're having a greater crisis of mental health issues, a sense of disconnection, a sense of isolation and loneliness, this will only precipitate that further. And so then we are thinking about health implications. Then we're thinking about, what does that mean as far as just like the sense of pursuit of happiness in this world, and this idea that we get to live in a world that we also get to enjoy and feel fulfilled by, right? Like, it's not just about finances, then it's about other things that are a little bit less tangible. And so we have to kind of think of that. I know that can't be the primary, but it is a piece that we would lose if we decide the Cashton Eagles are no longer, right? And we now join another school and blend them in some way that loses an identity, loses a sense of belonging, loses connection in a significant way that I think would be really, really painful and sad, and I think have, again, trickle down impacts that I think are important to recognize.
Senator Sarah Keyeski, our guest in the morning show. Always a good time when she visits, and we'll have a little bit more coming up here on the morning show. Joining us is Senator Sarah Keyeski. I haven't heard your name bandied about in terms of running for governor yet.
Oh, gosh, you will never hear my name bandied about for running for governor. Nope, I'm fine where I am, and I do not aspire to any such thing. And I feel for every single person putting their hat in that ring, because boy, oh boy, is that going to be a challenging race and a challenging job going forward, just given everything that's happening.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, lots of things to talk about. We talked in the break a little bit about our local community forum that we recently had, and one of the topics was net new construction, which is very, very a hot topic here in Richland Center. Any comments on that, Senator Keyeski?
Yeah, well, some of the way to increase revenue is tied to net new construction for our municipalities, which in some ways makes sense and has its value. But I think, again, for some rural small communities, either that can't really grow, and Richland Center is one of those that struggles to grow because of the location, kind of the way that your city is designed and where it's at topographically. And similar to Lodi, we have a hard time growing. We're kind of in this like little valley. And in some ways, growth shouldn't always be the barometer of how you get help, financial help, because that means you're always having to push toward growth. And some of us that live in small towns, we don't necessarily want to grow bigger. And so if that's the incentive, it kind of precludes financial investments in small towns that can be really beneficial, because they're not growing in the way that the financial formula has sort of implicated it must do, if that makes sense. And so I find it frustrating. Again, one of the formula things that are in here that I'm learning about that just feels a little counterintuitive in some ways, where I'm hoping that there's some recognition of that and some ways to change that, that honor areas where growth is not either a viable option or necessarily promoted or desired option.
Mm-hmm. And you're going to be meeting with Mayor Todd, I believe, somewhere along the line to talk about that.
Yeah. Mayor Todd and I are meeting today. Mm-hmm. And so hopefully he sees that on his schedule and is as delighted as I am to chat, because I'm really eager to talk to him again about what's been happening here locally, and learn the lay of the land and the current challenges and struggles.
Certainly concerning in the news, all the violence that's been going on. I wanted to ask you about your opinion about safety at the state capitol in the wake of all the recent violence. Do you feel that it's safe there while you're in session?
Well, oh goodness. I'm not somebody that is a fearful person in general. I don't know. I grew up on a farm and we never locked our doors, and we always kept our keys in the ignition. I just lived in a way that we trusted. And I still have a real, maybe naive, but hopeful idea of humanity, and so I don't worry a ton, just in general. But when the Minnesota legislator Melissa Hortman and her husband, and when they were killed recently in an assassination that happened because of their political roles, and when there was a list of politicians this person was potentially targeting, and it had some of my colleagues' names on it and the names of their pets and their addresses and their children's names. That felt very close to home and pretty scary, I'll be honest. My husband, I would say, he takes a very serious approach to the protection of me and our kids. And he was really tilted off, I guess, off kilter after that one, finding out about that. And so I would say political violence right now is scary. It feels like it's rampant, and it feels like it's being stoked when I'm being called by the most powerful person in our government right now, the president calling someone like me a left-wing lunatic that is the enemy within. Gosh, I can't tell you how, I feel heartbroken and a bit scared. I try not to live there. I try not to think about it much, but we also have an open Capitol where people can bring guns in. If you have a concealed carry permit, there's no, metal detectors, that kind of thing. Again, I try not to think about it much, but that's not very comfortable. So I don't know. I guess I just live with the reality of what it is right now, but I really hope that people recognize the importance of some better gun safety reform in our state, and recognize how that's so different than taking away guns, because I don't believe in that. I think that gun use and being able to hunt and being able to do target practice and, pigeon clay shooting, which I did recently, which was really fun. I think there's a place for that, and that's wonderful. But I think there's a difference, and I think most people, if you look at the numbers, most people agree with some regulations to make sure we're more safe with guns, and I'd like to see some serious conversation that's bipartisan in that area, so that we take it seriously and so that we can do our jobs in a way that give us the right to have differences of opinion, strong feelings about things that maybe people don't agree with, but we're not at risk of losing our lives because of what we believe, what we value, and what we do.
Mm-hmm. I can't fathom, somebody you don't agree with, maybe they're on the other side of the aisle or whatever, but I can't fathom hating somebody that much that you would, do an act of violence against them.
Well, I can't either, but I think there's a lot of propaganda that goes on, right? I think when you are told that the other side, I mean, I'll use some of the words that are used against me as a Democrat, that I'm evil, that I'm morally bankrupt, that I don't care about children. I think some people, especially if they're maybe not in an emotionally healthy place, they can see that as I'm a danger, right? And so in some ways, like I can't see it, but I can, right? And that's why it's so important to make sure, there's not access to guns to people that are unstable, or to have opportunities to have time frames where you can't just get a gun the minute you want a gun, right? Or to have background checks. I mean, those kinds of things make sense so that somebody that might be compelled in an emotional state, not a logical state, are doing some kind of damage. But I also think it's problematic. It's divisive, and it's I don't even know the right word, horrid, horrific, diabolical, I don't know. But to be calling someone like me these terrible words that define me as somebody that doesn't have values or that has negative desires for other people. I've been a mental health therapist my whole life. I have 6 kids. I'm not doing this job because I want to hurt people. I'm doing this job because I care deeply. And to be villainized and to be threatened and to be called names that just degrade me as a human, there's something fundamentally wrong with our country when people at the highest levels are doing this with no repercussions and are allowing it to happen and are infiltrating their departments with people that are contributing to this, like the vice president, like the Department of War secretary. I'm sickened by it.
I can't imagine why anybody would want to run for political office, either side right now. I mean,
it's funny because somebody asked me when I was with these other colleagues at the 6th convention we talked about at the very beginning. Somebody was asking me how I like it, and we were talking, and I said, "How do you like it?" And she's a legislator in Minnesota, and she said, "I must be a masochist because I really love it." And I thought to myself, that's kind of a funny answer, but maybe true. Like, I feel like I wouldn't like this job if it was a typical time, which sounds really weird, but I think the minutia of politics would be very boring for me as a person. I'm not sure that like these little squabbles would be something that I would typically get into. The reason I entered politics was because I was asked to run. And I was asked to run because people believed that I had the convictions and the values and the internal fortitude to fight for things that I believe in, that they could see in me because of things that I had done. And I know that to be true of myself too. And this feels like the most important time to fight against inhumanity, to fight against corporate greed, to fight against the repeal of rights, to fight against the things that I've really in my life have enjoyed and kind of assumed were American, these democratic rights. And so I don't know that I would even have considered it unless it was at such a pivotal time. And so I love my job because I feel like it's so damn important right now. I wouldn't want to be anywhere else, truly.
I can see your conviction, and I know one of the things you told me the first time you were here, you had just taken over, is you're not worrying about whether you get elected again, right?
If things are going well in our world, and I'm not needed again, I'll go back to doing what I was doing, right? I love to volunteer. I love to knit. I love to kayak. I love to do my private practice. And I'll get to, and I love to go watch my kids in their musical performances and in their volleyball games, right? I'm giving up a lot of that right now for this job. And I'm willing to do that. And my family is willing to endure the sacrifice of that too. But by no means do I need this job. I want this job right now because I feel like I'm a person that has a voice for rural America that might be different than what has typically presented or represented rural America. And I want to be able to maybe give some new thoughts, new ideas, new perspective. But if people decide, they don't want to vote for me and they don't think I'm doing a good job, then please, I shouldn't be here, because I should be doing a good job. I should be showing you that what I say is what I mean, and I'm doing those things. But this job is not for me. I never aspired to be a politician. Sometimes, like I said, it's a scary place now. So, feeling safe at my home, again, would be, quite nice. But I hope that if in 4 years, well, I guess it's more like 3 now, that if we're still in a situation where we need people like me that are willing to pull it, really kind of all on the line to fight hard, I hope that I'm still willing to run. And I hope that I'm reelected so that I can continue to do this important work.
We appreciate you taking the time to come and talk to us, and we'll have you back again real soon.
Sounds great. Thank you.
Appreciate it.
You're welcome.
Sarah Keyeski joining us, representing the 14th Senate District on today's morning show.